Hello everyone, welcome for joining in. In today's video, I will tell you about how to configure the dynamic y-axis. Let's start with a real example. In this graph, I have the dynamic y-axis already configured. If I choose 0, the y-axis starting from 0. If I choose dynamic, the scaling of the y-axis will be adjusted automatically to make the bridges more visible. In general, when we prepare this type of chart, it would be good to have the perspective of the scaling to understand if the data is skewed in some way. Let's take one more look. 0 allow us to see the equal scaling. Dynamic, it put the focus on the changes in between. Let's do it together. In this chart, we have the same case study. The only difference is the dynamic y-axis is not configured yet. There are 3 steps to create dynamic y-axis. The first step is to create a table to define dynamic and 0. Of course, there could be other selections also, for instance, minimum, maximum. The second step would be to create a calculated measure to allow end user to choose between the dynamic, 0, and other selections in the first table created. Then the third step would be do the visualization. Let's step in. I will put this dynamic y-axis to the chart on top. If we start with the first step to create a table, since it will be a very simple table, we can do it in the most easier way. From home, enter data. At the bottom, name, we will give it a name. Let's call it table test. Then the column, let's give it a name, help test. The content, we will keep it simpler here. Once you understand the basics, you can easily expand it. Dynamic or 0. Click load. All right. The first step, table is created. Let's check. This is the table we just created. We can also check from the table view. From there, go to the table test. This is the simple table we just created. The table name is table space test. There's only one column in this table. The column header is type test. And the content are 2, dynamic or 0. We just completed the step 1 for y-axis dynamic to create a table. This will lead us to the second step, to create a measure. To create a measure, we can type manually the new measure. It's very simple and straightforward. Once we completed this step, I will also leave the text measure to the comment field. So let's first give it a name. We will call this measure y-axis test. It equals, click Alt, create second line. In this way, we will be easily come back and read what we write in this DEX measure. Next, we will create a variant. Selection selected value. Then we need to add this table name we just created. So it's called table test. Then the field is the type test. Good. Then again, Alt and Enter. The third step. Another variant. Result equals if selection equals dynamic, which is the field in the table we just created, will be blank, otherwise 0. Again, Alt and Enter. Return result, which is the variant we just created. All right, now this measure is created. And we can see this measure is added to this new table we just created in the step 1, table test. That is good. That's what we want to do. Looks good. There's no error message. Let's recap. We just did together 2 steps in creating dynamic y-axis. The first step is to create a table. The table includes the dynamic selections between dynamic and 0. The second step is to create a calculated measure. Basically, the calculated measure would first be choosing from dynamic or 0 from the table we created. Then depends on the selections. We created this if condition. If dynamic is selected, it will be blank. And if 0 is selected, it's going to be 0. Then return the result. Next, we will need to apply the created type test as a filter selection for the chart. And in addition to that, we need to add the created measure to the y-axis. We will be doing the third step now, the visualization part. So first, we create a filter. And in this filter, we will add the field in the new table we created in step 1. Select the filter, go to Format. I will remove the slicer header and from the slicer settings, I have the tail. Depends on the space you have, you can resize the filter. When it comes to the user interface, it really depends on the information you would like to communicate. So in this case, I would like to show to the end user immediately the 2 options between dynamic and 0. So it's easier to read in this tile format than drop-down list. With this filter selection ready, if we click between dynamic and 0, nothing had happened. Why is that? We didn't add the created measure yet to the y-axis. Let's do that. select the chart, go to the format. In this y-axis, click minimum. Now we need to choose table test created measure called y-axis test. Click OK. Once we add the created measure as a condition to y-axis, so let's test again. When I choose 0, in this chart, all the bar has equal scaling. That would give us a good perspective. Then, when I choose dynamic, the chart would highlight the movement in between and leave more space. At the same time, all the bars does not have the equal scaling. As we can see, the starting point is not 0 anymore. All right. We just went through together how to configure the dynamic y-axis. To summarize, there are 3 steps. The first step is to create a table. The second step, to create a calculated measure. To define the result after we choose the different selections. The last step is to add the created table and measure to the visualization. We need to add separately to the visualization first the table created as a filter, then the measure created to the y-axis formatting. Thank you again for sharing your valuable time with us today. I hope you'll find the information valuable. I'm Jennifer Liang, finance expert who love BI tools.